Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Lewis. I never thought I'd be telling this story. Honestly, if you had told me a few months ago that I'd be sitting here talking about how my marriage fell apart, I would have laughed it off. But life has a way of throwing you straight into the fire when you least expect it. This isn't just another cheating story. No, this one gets messy. Real messy. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened. How I found out my wife was lying to my face. How I played along while setting up my own plan. And how I made sure she faced the consequences of her actions. Also, I added personal lessons I learned from the whole situation. If you are in any relationship, both male or female, it's important you watch till the end. So, buckle up. This is one hell of a story. It all started with what was supposed to be a nice surprise. My wife had been away on a business trip for about a week, and I wanted to do something thoughtful. You know, one of those small but meaningful gestures that show you care. So, I decided to get to the airport early. She thought I'd be picking her up at the usual time, but I figured, why not surprise her the moment she landed? Maybe grab some coffee, catch up, or just spend a little extra time together. I remember standing there, checking the arrival board, my heart actually kind of excited. I was imagining how happy she'd be when she saw me. But what happened next wasn't anything like that. Instead of seeing my wife walking through the terminal, looking tired, but happy to be home, I saw her standing way too close to some younger guy. And before I could even process who she was with, she kissed him. And let me be clear, it wasn't some quick peck on the cheek. This was slow, familiar, and intimate. I was shocked. Who the hell was this guy? What the hell was happening? For a second I stood there frozen, just watching. Then, my instinct kicked in. I reached for my phone, hand shaking slightly as I tried to snap a photo. I needed proof. If I confronted her right away, she might deny it, twist the story, and make me feel like I was overreacting. But if I had solid evidence, she wouldn't be able to talk her way out of it. But I wasn't fast enough. Just as I lifted my phone, she turned. Our eyes met. Her face drained of color. She knew she was caught. Within seconds, she was rushing toward me. Her expression was a mix of panic and forced casualness, like she was trying to pretend nothing was wrong but also knew there was no way out of this. The guy? He didn't even look my way. He just picked up his bag and walked off, like this was normal. Before I could say a single word, she was already talking. Hey, you're early. I was just about to text you. I didn't say anything. I just stared at her. Let her squirm. She kept talking, words rushing out too fast, too rehearsed. Oh, you probably saw that, right? It's nothing. Just a goodbye kiss. Nothing serious. My silence must have made her nervous, because she started over-explaining. It's just a cultural thing. You know how people in some countries kiss on the cheek when they say goodbye? It's like that. Except it wasn't like that. Not even close. But I still didn't react. I didn't yell, didn't accuse her of anything. I just stood there, my mind filing everything away for later. After a few seconds of awkward silence, she finally changed tactics. Listen, let's just go home, okay? We can talk about this there. I'll explain everything. Now let me tell you something. That right there was the moment I knew she was guilty. A woman who has nothing to hide will defend herself immediately. She'll say something like, "What? No way, you misunderstood," or "That was literally just a goodbye, why are you acting weird?" But my wife's first instinct was to de-escalate, to get me out of the public, where she could control the conversation. So, I played along. I nodded, still not saying much, just watching her reaction. "Okay," I finally said. "Let's go home." But in my mind, I wasn't going home to hear her explanations. I was going home to figure out exactly how deep this went. And from that moment on, she had no idea that the game had already begun. The moment we got into the car, the silence became unbearable. I could feel her eyes on me, sneaking nervous glances every few seconds, waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I just gripped the steering wheel, staring straight ahead as I pulled out of the airport parking lot. She shifted in her seat, clearing her throat as if she was about to say something, but then she hesitated, probably trying to come up with the perfect excuse. Inside, I was burning with anger, but I wasn't going to give her the reaction she was expecting. I wanted answers, but I wanted real ones, not whatever pre-rehearsed script she was trying to sell me. She finally broke the silence. "Listen, I know how that must have looked, but I swear it's nothing. He's just a coworker." Her voice was careful. I could tell she was testing the waters, trying to see how much I had actually seen, how much I knew. I nodded slowly, keeping my face blank. "Just a coworker," I repeated as if I was considering it. "Yeah," she said quickly, relieved that I wasn't immediately pushing back. "I mean, I know it might have looked bad, but it's really not what you think. He's just a friend, we work together. That's it." I made a small, thoughtful noise in response. Not accusing, not agreeing, just enough to keep her talking. I kept my face neutral, acting like I was taking it and like I was actually considering it. Inside, I knew she was lying through her teeth. You don't touch someone like that unless there's something more. I didn't push. She thought she was in the clear. She had no idea that in my mind, the pieces were already shifting into place. By the time we pulled into the driveway, she looked more relaxed. I played the part. Because right now, I wasn't interested in arguing. I was interested in proving it. That night, after the most uncomfortable dinner of my life, my wife acted as if everything was normal. When we finally went to bed, I waited. Eventually, her movement stilled, and I knew she had fallen asleep. That was my chance. I turned over carefully, reaching over as quietly as possible. I took her phone from the nightstand. I keyed in her password, and the phone unlocked instantly. That small victory was short-lived, because what I saw next turned my stomach inside out. At first, I checked her messages. The ones with her coworker's name were missing, but she wasn't smart enough to cover all her tracks. I went straight to her archived messages, and that's where I found everything she had tried to bury. I started reading. Their texts weren't just flirtatious. They were intense, romantic, and undeniably intimate. This was a full-blown affair. The messages detailed everything. Their plans before the trip, their excitement about spending time together, and even how they coordinated their flights so they could meet up at the airport before boarding. I kept scrolling. They even reminisced about their time together during the trip. I had to put the phone down for a second. This was the woman I built my life with. The person I trusted the most. I took screenshots and sent them to myself as evidence, just in case. Then I archived the chat once again. Then, just as carefully as I had taken it, I placed her phone back on the nightstand. I laid back down, staring at the ceiling once again. But this time, I knew for certain. My wife was a liar, and she had no idea that, from this moment on, I was done playing the fool. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I got up as if nothing had happened. I made coffee, went through my normal routine, and even gave her a casual, indifferent, "have a good day," when she left for work. But the second she was out the door, my real work began. I had a friend who worked in HR at my wife's company. We weren't best friends, but we were close enough that we talked a few times. I sent him a message, something casual at first. Just a friendly, "Hey, got a sec?" to set the tone. Once he replied, I went straight to the point. "Hey man, quick question. Was my wife's business trip last minute?" She never mentioned it until right before she left. There was a pause. Then his response came through. "What business trip?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the message, feeling my pulse pick up. I took a breath and typed back, keeping it light. She told me she was traveling for work. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't some last-minute scheduling thing. Another pause. Then, the message that shattered the last piece of doubt I had left. "Bro, she didn't go on any business trip. She took personal days." I assumed it was just vacation time. I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly. So she and this guy had taken time off together. And the worst part? She had looked me in the eyes the night before and gaslit me into believing it was all in my head. I felt the anger rise again. But here's the thing, I wasn't about to blow up on her just yet. If I cornered her with all the evidence right away, she might try to manipulate the situation in ways I couldn't anticipate. I had no idea what she might do if she felt trapped, and I wasn't willing to take that risk. Instead, I stayed quiet and started making moves behind the scenes. My goal? Secure myself first. If this marriage was going to end, I needed to make sure I walked away having the advantage. The trick was to play it slow and rope her into something she wouldn't easily get out of. One evening, while we were sitting on the couch, I sighed and said, with the way the market's been lately, I've been thinking we should sell some of our joint investments. It might be a good time to cash out while prices are still decent. She barely looked up from her phone. Yeah? You think so? I nodded. Yeah, I read an article about it. Besides, it'd be nice to free up some money, maybe put it into something safer. I kept my tone light, completely neutral. Nothing suspicious. She shrugged. I guess that makes sense. If you think it's a good idea, I'm fine with it. And just like that, the first piece was set in motion. Over the next few weeks, I carefully orchestrated the sale of our shared assets, making sure the money flowed into separate accounts. Not all of it, of course. I wasn't stupid. That would raise red flags. Instead, I made it seem like we were both benefiting from it, splitting things fairly while making sure my portion was locked away in an account not directly attached to me where she couldn't touch it. By the end of the month, our finances were almost completely separate. I had liquidated assets, redirected funds, and ensured that if things went south, she wouldn't be able to drain my accounts completely or claim anything significant. I was broke on paper. I was setting the stage for the final move. Once I had everything in place, I could finally expose her, leave her with nothing, and walk away on my terms. She thought she was playing me. She had no idea I was 3 steps ahead. Even though I had the screenshots of her messages, I knew they weren't enough to convince the company to fire her for having a relationship with her coworker, which was against company policy. I needed something that even she couldn't spin her way out of it. So, I decided to bring in a professional. A friend of mine had once used a private investigator for a messy divorce, and after hearing his story, I knew it was the best move. I made a few calls, found a guy with solid experience, and handed over everything I had: her schedule, her work location, and of course my suspicions. He assured me that if something was going on, he'd find it. It didn't take long. The first thing he uncovered was that their workplace was already buzzing with rumors. My wife and her colleague had been the subject of gossip for months, but there was no hard proof. Some people had seen them leave the office together often, disappearing for long lunch breaks, sometimes not coming back for hours. But while rumors were interesting, they weren't proof. That's when the investigator took things up a notch. Over the next few days, he followed them, monitored their patterns, and gathered real evidence. He captured photos of them leaving work together. He got them on the day they met at a secluded spot after work and stayed there for hours. One particularly damning image showed them sharing a moment inside her car, laughing and touching each other in a way that was far from professional. But the real smoking gun? A series of images showed my wife and her coworker in the back seat of her car, parked in the company lot, doing things that left no room for doubt. That was it. The proof I needed. You don't need to say it. I realized just how much of a fool I had been at this point. I had everything I needed to destroy her, but I didn't want a messy, emotional confrontation where she could cry and manipulate her way out of it. I didn't want to hear her excuses or watch her scramble for a way to fix things. No, I wanted her downfall to be slow and painful. I wanted her to feel her life unravel just like she had unraveled our marriage. So, I went for the one thing that would hit her the hardest: her career. I gathered all the evidence. Then, using a fake email and a secure anonymous account, I leaked everything to the company. I framed it as a concerned employee calling out inappropriate workplace behavior that was tarnishing the company's reputation. No names, no personal details, just the cold, hard proof of what was happening right under their noses. The response was immediate. The company, desperate to protect its image, launched an internal investigation. Within a week, my wife and her coworker were called in for questioning. I wasn't there, but I can imagine the panic that set in when she realized that someone had exposed her. She must have scrambled for a way to deny it, but the photos didn't lie. At first, they were placed on suspension. The company made it look like they were just investigating, but I knew what was really happening. They were buying time to clean up the mess. My wife called me that evening, her voice shaking, telling me something crazy was happening at work. She had no idea it was me who pulled the strings. Months later, the final blow came. The company let them both go quietly, wanting to avoid a bigger scandal. She lost everything. The career she had spent years building? Gone. The respect of her coworkers? Shattered. Her reputation? Destroyed. Once I saw her collect the blow from the company, I didn't wait. I went straight to a lawyer and filed for divorce, citing infidelity. There was no room for discussion. When she got served with the papers, she lost it. At first, she tried to play the shocked and hurt wife, acting like she couldn't believe I would do this. Then came the desperation. She cried, begged, and swore up and down that it was all a misunderstanding. But her words meant nothing to me now. At this point, we were still living in the same house, but I had already thought ahead. I knew the court would give her the house, and I already stopped paying the mortgage, because I was broke on paper. All I had to do was make sure they removed my name from the asset when they awarded her the house. That meant there was no long, messy legal battle over money because I didn't have any they knew about. She couldn't take what I didn't have. A week later, I moved out as she decided to contest the agreements of the divorce in court. It will be a long ride, but I don't care. First big lesson. When something feels off, it usually is. People in happy, healthy relationships don't scramble for an explanation when they get caught doing something innocent. If someone is being completely honest with you, their story will make sense the first time they tell it. They won't have to tweak details or try to convince you to ignore what you saw with your own eyes. When my wife started over-explaining instead of just telling the truth, that was all the proof I needed. Another lesson? Silence is a powerful tool. A lot of people think that when you catch someone doing something shady, you need to react instantly. But that's exactly what cheaters expect. They want you to lash out so they can flip the script and make it about your reaction instead of their actions. By staying calm, I put her on edge. She was the one panicking, not me. Then there's the financial side of things. Never put yourself in a position where someone else can screw you over financially. If I hadn't been smart enough to separate our bank accounts and sell off shared assets before making my move, this story could have ended very differently. Some people, when caught, will try to hold on to whatever they can, especially money. And finally, the most important lesson, revenge is best served cold. If I had acted on pure emotion at that moment, I might have just gotten an apology, some half-baked excuse, and then ended up forgiving her out of guilt. Instead, I played the long game. I gathered proof, protected myself, and made sure that when she fell hard. And trust me, nothing hurts a liar more than losing control of the situation. At the end of the day, betrayal teaches you more about who you are than it does about the person who betrayed you. It shows you what you're willing to tolerate, what you're capable of handling, and how strong you really are when you stop making excuses for other people's bad behavior. If I had just let this go, I would have spent the rest of my life second-guessing myself. Instead, I walked away knowing I didn't just expose a liar. I made sure she faced the consequences of her choices. And that's how you take your power back. She tried reaching out to me a few times, mostly through mutual friends as we battle things out in court. I ignored every single attempt. She wasn't sorry for what she did. And that's the thing about betrayal. It has a way of boomeranging back to the person who started it. And with that, my story ends.